Hey, well, this is something that I've been wanting to do for quite a while. Well, not that long actually. It's been like about a week. But it might be a little controversial to some people. Some people might not want to hear what this has to say about opinion from a man and his viewpoints. So what I'll try to do is, if I feel it's important, then I'll express it. If not, then I won't. Because this is a book that says How Satan Turned America Against God, written by William P. Grady, Bill Grady. And he goes into detail of how Satan actually turned America against God. One was by slavery. Two was by popery, the Catholics immigrating to the United States. Three was these secret sects, like Illuminati and stuff, the Church of Scientology, all these other so-called religions. There are really no religions at all. Just that, and a lot of stuff goes around with the CFR, Council for Foreign Relations and stuff that help organize the things that we don't really need. Hooey in this nation. Hooey. Excuse me. Like United Nations, we don't need the United Nations. We especially don't need it here in the United States. We'd be better off without the United Nations. I'll just say it like that. We're so better off. But that's, of course, that's my opinion, right? But I'm sticking with that opinion. Let's see here. Um, I'm gonna try to read as much as I can, but I'm gonna be kind of delicate on some things because this, like I said, this is not my viewpoint. I don't really think, and I'll express it whenever I get the chance. I don't feel exactly the way William P. Grady does, Bill Grady does, about certain things, detailed things. And of course, I was born and raised in the South. I heard things and stories said, and I've heard the way I should feel about a Negro or a black man, a black woman, but I never had that problem. I never ever really had problems with black people at all. Even though growing up in the South, you hear the word nigger a lot and stuff like that. I never had that problem. I mean, I know what they people call nigger, and what the simple the word means is a black person. Negro, nigger, Niger, nigger, Niger. It means black, or that's what it means. Negro, nigger, black. Okay, people from the continent of Africa. So when you get down to it, Bill Grady talks about three general people. Okay, the sons of Noah. Okay, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Okay, so as we know in the Bible, Ham's son Canaan was cursed, and as we know, because of what he did. And now it doesn't say anything homosexual that he did toward the ground, that he did toward his father Ham, or anything like that. It could have been he spied on his mom and dad, or something like that, or he could have poked at Noah while he was drunk on wine, made fun of him, or what have you, or told Shem and Ham. Sorry, it's Shem and Japheth. Hey, look at Dad, he's drunk. You know, doesn't he look crazy? And so, of course, Shem and Japheth walked backward and cover their father. Out of sign of respect. You know, maybe that's something. That's why maybe Canaan was involved in it. His grandson, Noah's grandson, and so being that that was his father, Ham should have. His son Canaan. Um, you know, Ham should have known better than to let his own child disrespect his father like that. Of course, we don't know. Just what are we reading in the Bible? That's what we have to go by, not assume anything. Okay, so slavery, one of the first things that he names here. It says the first counteroffensive in America was the disastrous establishment of slavery, often referred to as the peculiar institution in today's super-sensitive society. One can hardly separate the historical topic of slavery from that of the current race relations. The issue of race, or more exactly racism, is itself about a peculiar subject as you can get for several reasons. First, the average brain dead American, now this is Bill Grady talking, okay, has to become so completely programmed by the liberal media that he is no longer capable of thinking for himself. Second, he has been taught to believe that no one else should be allowed to think either, much less hold or express an opinion that is considered politically incorrect, i.e., an idea that disagrees with CNN, the UN, the NAACP, ACLU, the NEA, Hollywood, and Rome, etc. Catholics, the Vatican. Remember that the major symptom of this psychotic neurosis is that facts will appear to be negative, are not only completely irrelevant, but they must never be voiced in public. For instance, a television special on the subject of air disaster stated that, according to aviation statistics, passengers who fly on domestic carriers in Africa were 18 times more likely to die in crashes than those flying elsewhere. How would the casual sharing of this fact, okay, or better yet, an intelligent inquiry as to the cause for said fact go over during coffee and donut time at the local PTA? If somehow the subject was broached, sooner or later the right nation or nations would be found to take the blame for Africa's aerial incompetence, i.e., their pilots were not given the same quality training as white pilots, etc. As a second example, several years ago, a noted Harvard University psychologist and a Bradley Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute investigated the comparative intelligence of races. Their findings were published in the prestigious Harvard Review. Strangely, they evoked a storm of protest against the researchers, as the party line for all accredited schools dictates that matters of race are to be approached sentimentally and politically, not objectively and scientifically. Without gaining prior knowledge of their results, do you suppose any community coffee clutch in America would be interested in discussing this pig in a poke? See the controversial New York Times bestseller, The Bell Curve, Intelligence and Class Structure in American Life by Richard J. Herrnstein and Charles Murray. A third reason the subject of race is so peculiar is because the widespread pressure of political correctness has polarized the courage of America's dwindling, thinking minority. Isaiah 10:14. More and more people are just plain scared to tell you what they really believe. They are afraid to speak their piece, P-I-E-C-E, that is. As our grandparents used to say, no one has the guts to tell the emperor that he's naked. Allow me to illustrate with the following personal observation. While visiting a local library during the Christmas season, I counted 16 books on the subject of Kwanzaa, none of which had been checked out according to their cards. Some of the exciting titles include It's Kwanzaa Time, my first Kwanzaa book, Kwanzaa, A Family Affair, and Celebrating Kwanzaa. It is my expressed personal opinion as a free-thinking American, Bill Grady's, that this is about as ludicrous as you can get. Now, of course, this can only mean that I must hate black people, right? But maybe, just maybe, the real reason is that I hate the way many sincere black Americans are manipulated at will. And they are. i.e., see any episode of Jerry Springer, Ricky Lake, or Jenny Jones, whatever the new ones are now. One book declares a special holiday called Kwanzaa celebrates the African culture. Blacks all over the world take part in this holiday. Kwanzaa is not religious. It does not celebrate an event. It celebrates a whole race of people. Okay. If Kwanzaa is not supposed to be a religious event, why does the holiday run from December 26th through January 1st? According to the First Amendment, I have a God given right to hold and state my own personal opinion. Bill Grady says, I believe Kwanzaa is an attempt to divert the attention of black Americans from Jesus Christ, the receiver. Hey, the reason for the season, to any number of pagan African rituals that center around witchcraft and demonism. Let me see what he's barking at. What do you see? Anyway, what do you see? I gotta go see what this dog's barking at. I'm right back. This is my somebody getting in their car, getting ready to go to work. Sorry, first viewer. Okay, he's barking at somebody getting in the car, getting ready to go to work. Usually somebody gets up about 5 o'clock and gets ready to go to work. It's 5 o'clock in the morning. Let's see here. Let's see here. According to the First Amendment, I believe Kwanzaa is an attempt to divert the attention of black Americans from Jesus Christ, the reason for the season, to any number of pagan African rituals that center around witchcraft and demonism. In the book Kwanzaa Family Affair, black American families are encouraged to make traditional African masks during Kwanzaa. If Kwanzaa is not religious, why does every major encyclopedia connect such masks with spiritualism? Spiritualism is a sensitive term for Satanism. The Academic American Encyclopedia states masks are artificial face coverings used in ritual and primitive theater to transform the wearers into or identify them with the powers and properties of animals or supernatural beings. I guess that's why Batman wears a mask. That's why Black Panther wears a panther mask. The World Book Encyclopedia expands on Kwanzaa's non-religious agenda. Most of these masks not only hide the identity of the wearer, but supposedly also give the masked person magic powers. Such masks represent gods or spirits. Ceremonial masks developed from the belief of many primitive societies that gods can control the forces of nature. Dances at various ceremonies wore masks that represent these gods. And mask made its wearer unrecognizable, and so he seemed to almost lose his identity and become the spirit itself. When these ceremonial dancers wore such masks, the people believed that the gods were actually present, i.e., it's Kwanzaa time. In the revival at Ephesus, The converted heathens who had formerly used curious arts burned their satanic garbage publicly. Acts 19:19. Whenever Kwanzaa advocates profess to be non-religious, they are only pulling your leg, according to Kwanzaa by Deborah M. Newton Chocolate. Africa is a big continent. Many different African tribes, now this is her speaking, live in Africa and have many different customs and beliefs. But all African people know that the fruits of the earth bring life to them. The earth nourishes them. So Africans say that the earth is their mother. Africans have always celebrated planting and harvest, but even more important, the Africans are the spirits of their ancestors. Two Africans are the spirits of the ancestors. At harvest time, Africans offer the first fruits of the harvest to those who have gone before them. Um, he says, I submit to my readers on the authority of the King James Bible that famine is a result of worshiping an earthly mother rather than the heavenly Father. And the scripture says, but the land whither ye go to possess it is a land of hills and valleys, and drinketh water of the rain of heaven, a land which the Lord thy God careth for. The eyes of the Lord thy God are always upon it, from the beginning of the year even unto the end of the year. And it shall come to pass, if ye shall hearken diligently to my commandments which I command you this day, to love the Lord your God, and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul, that I will give you the rain of your land in its due season, the first rain and the latter rain, that thou mayest gather in thy corn and thy wine and thine oil, and I will send grass in thy fields with thy cattle, that thou mayest eat and be full. Take heed to yourselves, that your heart be not deceived, and ye turn aside and serve other gods and worship them. And then the Lord's wrath be kindled against you, and he shut up the heaven, and that there be no rain, and that the land yield not her fruit, unless ye perish quickly from off the good land which the Lord giveth you. Deuteronomy 11:17. He says, in case you haven't noticed, the dark continent is still a poverty-stricken third world nightmare. Do you wonder why? Consider the following piece found in USA Today for April 9th, 2002. Witch doctors get paid for national soccer victory. A decade after Ivory Coast soccer teams won the African National Cup, the government paid witch doctors who claimed to have aided in the win. The government hired witch doctors from Accredio to help the team beat Ghana. I'm sorry. When they weren't paid, the witch doctors said that they jinxed the team. It hasn't won a national cup since 1992. That might change after $2,000 in payment this week. A survey of the internet will reveal the fruit of Africa's ongoing preoccupation with Satanism. And an article by Anthony C. Lobadio entitled "Child Rape Epidemic in South Africa" appeared in December 26, 2001. WorldNet Daily rather. A few of the more revolting excerpts documenting the social mores practiced in the liberated land of Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu are as follows. Seems like a lot of people forget about this, and this all revolves around slavery, of course. Why they, what happened there, and not every. I think he was trying to get at that. Not all blacks are like this. There's a lot are. It's like that Mandela effect we're talking about here. People forget about things and stuff, and like, oh, what are you talking about? We don't know nothing about a history, but history was already taught, but people just chose to ignore it. So now they don't even remember it no more, like a Mandela effect. But anyway, it goes into detail here. A bizarre brief belief among many African black men that sex with a virgin, even with a child or baby, can cure HIV/AIDS. Is fueling what is already one of the highest child sexual exploitation rates in the world. Again, this is Bill Grady, author of the book. I'm not saying I know anything about this because I don't. I'm only reading what the man told me. I mean, not the man told me. Reading what he. I'm only reading what he wrote because I'm thinking it's a good interest to blacks, whites, and whoever. According to the latest report by South Africa Police Service, children are the victims of 41% of all rapes, attempted rapes reported in the country. And attempted rapes reported in the country. Over 15% of all reported rapes are against children under 11, and another 26% against children 12 to 17. For the year 2000, some 58 children were raped or the victims of rape attempts in South Africa every single day. The trend is worsening. Babies as young as only a few months old are being raped almost daily. There was an Amber Alert that came on my phone in Nashville last week, and it talked about a black man abducting a several-month-year-old baby, and he was armed. And you're like, why is a man abducting his own child and he's armed? That doesn't make sense. But anyway, I just kind of comparing that. But I'm not. I don't know how this book reads to some people. So if somebody's got a problem with it, just say, and just turn the thing off. That's all I can say. And appreciate your comments, and just don't watch the video because I'm just reading what the man says. I don't have that personal opinion myself on most things. I mean, some few points he's talking about, but other things I agree with him. But anyway, let's read on there. The trend is, did I say that? Okay, it's worsening. South African police statistics show that last year, 21,538 rapes and attempts of rapes of children under the age of 18 were reported. This story has been largely ignored by the mainstream media. Yeah, you don't see it on Fox. You don't see it on CNN, ABC, NBC, CBS, or none of that. And in the world, the Western world, and the United States, in order to perpetuate the Mandela myth of the wonderful new South Africa, and former Republic of South Africa military intelligence officer Koos Van der said, okay, that's what he said former Republic of South African intelligence Koos Van der Murray. Okay. So why should anyone look cross-eyed at me, he says, for trying to prevent black boys and girls from being tricked into worshiping Satan? Ditto for any white children messing around with Dungeons and Dragons, Harry Potter, or Pokemon. And why are American kids also losing their grip on the English language? Sup? Shortened version of what's up. Ebonics for what's up. What was bad enough, but now our youngsters are being taught to say Hujambo. Other important Kwanzaa words are as follows: Kwamba, creativity, as in making voodoo masks, etc. Ujama, using money for the good of the community. Ujima, collective work and responsibility, street gangs. Kikukombe cha Yumba, a ceremonial cup. Benedera ya Taifa, the new African American flag. I would suggest, he says, Mumbo Jumbo, Bill Grady for Kwanzaa. Bill Grady's personal testimony. Let's see here. Yeah. So. Okay, So remember that the core of race-related political correctness is to equate one's perceived ability to recognize various distinctions between races, white men can't jump, etc., with automatic hatred. That may be how Dan read other things, but I am perfectly able to maintain my own Bible based convictions without hating anyone. I'm the same way. This is what Bill Grady said, but I'm the same way. Throughout my personal ministry of over a quarter century as an ordained Baptist preacher, I have shared the gospel with thousands of black people. When I was saved less than 6 months, um, I knelt with a black man in his living room and led his entire family to Christ while we wept and held hands together. Brother Morris went on to pastor a black Baptist church in Media, Pennsylvania. On another soul winning occasion, I picked up a black man who had ran out of gas on the I-95 outside of Philadelphia. At 2 a.m., we knelt on the highway in a mild rain while the man received Jesus Christ as his personal Savior. Another time in Oak Orchard, Delaware, I got to lead the wife and daughter of my wife's favorite high school teacher to Christ. They were both black. While working my way through Bible college at the Blaw Knox Foundry in East Chicago, Indiana, I had the joy of seeing dozens of black men come to Christ. This was accomplished through personal soul winning during break times and preaching during the 3 a.m. the 3 a.m. nightly lunch hour service, midnight shift, which I had the privilege of overseeing with the help of several fellow students. My crane operator, Sonny D, got saved. Charlie the burner got saved. So did numerous machinists and common laborers. On one occasion, my black foreman, Bill D, got so excited, he helped me fill up a church bus with fellow employees for a special Sunday morning evangelistic service honoring area blue collar workers. Over 300 men attended the service at the First Baptist Church of Hammond, with many accepting Jesus Christ as Savior. Another time, I organized a special memorial service in the factory lunchroom for two black machinists who were killed in a motorcycle accident. Having visited the dying men in the hospital and their grieving loved ones at home, I was asked to speak at the funeral. The mother of one of those young men told me that my sermon helped her more than the one delivered by her own pastor. She later began attending the First Baptist Church of Hammond and remained faithful for more than 10 years. Over 150 men attended a special Christian service after I announced that a black Santa Claus would be in attendance. Was I ever embarrassed when Santa showed up late and a tad inebriated? About 20 souls made a public profession at the invitation following the message. During those formative years, I have also had the unique opportunity of fellowshipping with many black pastors in the Chicagoland area. Some even took me under their wings and tutored me in preaching. The braver ones turned me loose on their congregations for practice. Can I get a witness? One of these fine men was my friend and neighbor of 5 years, Reverend Joe Hughes, who later pastored for a number of years in Memphis, Tennessee. Pastor Gene Dix was another. He once asked me to recruit 3 white ministerial students from Hyles Anderson College to join 3 of his black preacher friends for a special Good Friday service at his church in Gary, Indiana. Each of us was assigned one of the 7 last sayings of Jesus on which to speak. It was a wonderful day. The Lord also led me to preach on the streets in the various ghetto neighborhoods of Chicago, including notorious hellhole, Cabrini Green. While driving through this stronghold of Satan, I came upon a block party in a vacant lot featuring blaring rock music and a half-naked dance troupe. When I noticed several parents and small children in the crowd, including some who rode our Sunday school buses, I stood up on a crate and the dancers just stood on the stage with their mouths open. The crowd listened respectfully, and powerful conviction was felt. On another occasion, one of my converts came to the church and walked the aisle, professing Christ as his personal Savior. He must have meant business because he handed me a bag of heroin at the altar. I shot my college president, Dr. Wendell Evans, by handing the white substance to him. At the same time, I was also busy distributing sermon helps to various black ministers. In fact, the Lord enabled me to sell so many copies of the Encyclopedia of 7,700 illustrations that I received a personal visit from Dr. Paul Lee Tan, the book's editor. I was even welcome to set up a display at a all-black pastors convention in Omaha, Nebraska. Apart from my three helpers, a Jewish fellow modeling the choir robes he was selling, I represent the only other white person in the crowd of over 10,000. On the last day, I went to work before leaving to accept my first full-time ministry assignment as pastor. Reverend Daniels, a retired black minister, conducted a special farewell service in my honor. His pastoral charge was packed with power, love, and wisdom over the years until the company went out of business. I had a standing invitation to rent the plant and preach whenever I was in the area. On to the fact that there weren't many blacks in neo-Nazi northern what the heck was that? I rarely got the chance to witness to any during my 5-year pastorate in the Coeur d'Alene area. When I returned to Hyles Anderson College as an instructor in 1986, I joined the jail ministry and spent the majority of my Saturdays preaching as the Westfield Correctional Unit at the Westfield Correctional Unit outside of Michigan City, Indiana. I would also preach at the famous Pacific Garden Rescue Mission in downtown Chicago, where Billy Sunday was converted. In the course of one sermon to nearly 300 winos, mostly black, I split the seat of my pants wide open in front of 30 Hyles Anderson College students who were seated behind me in the choir area. A good number of these mission men were saved at the invitation. When actress Lucille Ball died in 1989, a Chicago newspaper headline read, "We love you, Lucy, wherever you are." That evening, the Lord impressed me to preach a message at the Pacific Garden Mission, "Where is Lucy?" With all due humility, I've informed more than once that the brothers talked about that message for years. One of my hardworking evening college students was a fine black man who pastored a struggling storefront church in a rundown Chicago neighborhood. After receiving an invitation to preach to his Sunday morning crowd, I felt a definite prompting to speak on the theme of suffering. When I finished, Sister Anthony rose to her feet in tears and testified how the Lord had used the sermon to lift the burden she had been carrying since her daughter's brutal murder only 2 weeks before. She then went on to sing, "I'm coming up on the mountain or on the rough side." While traveling as a full-time evangelist since 1996, I have continued to witness to anyone I can, regardless of his or her color. On such trip, my wife and I were privileged to lead a sweet black maid to Christ at a motel in North Carolina. For several years, I have also been honored to serve on the board of International Baptist Outreach Missions in Asheville, North Carolina, founded by Dr. J. Wendell Runyon. One of the more fruitful countries in which we minister is Kenya, East Africa. During a mission trip with Dr. Runyon in September 2003, I was privileged to reach in 8 Baptist churches in Kenya, preaching 8 Baptist churches in Kenya and Uganda. While all of the facilities were primitive, one sanctuary consisted of a bench and 2 chairs arranged under the sprawling branches of a solitary tree. At that meeting, several chickens and cows dropped by unexpectedly and caught a portion of my sermon. Before leaving the states, we helped officiate the graduation service for the local Bible Institute. The highlight of the trip for me personally was the honor of laying hands on 10 African pastors and praying for God's blessing in their ministries, on their ministries. Within a few weeks of my return, the Lord enabled me to raise $500 to purchase 10 bicycles for the new graduates. Having visited for over 40 countries in my life, I found Kenyan people to be some of the noblest, sweetest souls I've ever met, unlike other African nations, which have been commandeered by Islam, communism, or Catholicism. Kenya's cultural heritage is British. Her predominant values produced by an authorized version, 1611. Kenya provides a rare glimpse of Ham dwelling in docile contentment within the bounds of his habitation. Acts 17:26. Kenya's attitude factor is 0. Personally, I refuse to be pressured into using the race term African American. I certainly have never referred to myself as an Irish, Ukrainian, Finnish American. However, after enjoying the company of the Kenyan people, I believe the words American African would be a more accurate description for the discontented element of Ham's prosperity dwelling in this nation. Now, don't miss the subliminal message suggested by these 25 personal experiences spread over as many years. Dr. Grady's is a racist. Dr. Grady hates blacks, according to the straw man philosophy of end-day comparisons, compromisers. One cannot separate hatred from common sense. Why hasn't Martin Luther King ever been accused of racism when he preached against interracial marriage? Ditto for Abraham Lincoln, Muhammad Ali, and Calypso Louis Farrakhan. If anyone is interested, I found a story will illustrate the true essence of racism. The incident occurred during our 25th year wedding anniversary, second honeymoon in Hawaii. As I drove down a certain road, my wife and I spotted former NBA star Kareem Abdul-Jabbar jogging in what we later learned was his own neighborhood. This really amazed us as we remembered seeing him in Los Angeles airport 25 years earlier while en route to our first Hawaiian honeymoon. Deja vu. After making an incongruous U-turn, I came upon my soul-winning prospect as he was stretching his leg against an incline. However, when I twice attempted to initiate a simple greeting, the black Muslim made it clear that he was not about to turn around and even look at Whitey, much less talk to him. Driving away, it dawned on me that this was the same reaction I received when I approached the Reverend Louis Farrakhan at O'Hare Airport a year earlier. And then all I can figure is that they must believe in the spirit of Ujama. Ojama, that's what his name is, pronounced Ojama. Kwanzaa for discrimination, as one of their authority recommends African Americans should set up their own businesses and patronize other African American stores. Not white people, I guess. Facts are a stubborn thing. Let's see here. I don't think I'm going to get a bit of this. It's quite a few pages. Let's see here. Yeah. It might be 2 or 3 videos. It might be 2 videos or more. I don't know. Let's C. Where'd it go? Oh, okay. Oh, it's not that many pages. Oh, okay. Let's see here. It says, facts are a stubborn thing. According to the World Book Encyclopedia, the era of modern slavery began in Africa itself. In Africa itself. Do you recall those butcher shops along the Congo described by Captain Grenfell? Well, you have to read this book to know. Roman Catholics from Spain and Portugal simply trapped into the lucrative market and became some of the best customers. Tapped in it. I'm sorry, not trapped. Brian Davis conversion. Other African blacks helped capture most of the enslaved Africans. Oh, yeah, I gotta get up here on this thing. Yep. Did you know that? You won't find this African history discussed in too many Kwanzaa books. The Dutch and other Protestant profiteers eventually join in. The subject of slavery in America is rarely treated in an honest and forthright manner. It is usually reported with a bias to historical facts. For instance, it is my personal opinion as a Christian American that the concept of one human being owning another human being is totally repugnant. On the other hand, I also resent how the slavery issue and race relations in general are continually manipulated to ensure the social agitation in America continues to escalate. To illustrate, I once had the opportunity to visit the Montpelier estate, former home to James and Dolly Madison, as squirrels jump from heaven, is how President Madison described Montpelier. Yet the average tourist receives a distinct subliminal tainting as he reviews the numerous exhibits to Madison's hypocrisy in keeping slaves on his plantation. The names of these slaves are plastered all over the walls. Now, I may not be the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I'm no spoon either. I stopped counting the names of these brutalized heathens after 18. Moses, Ruth, Peter, Shadrach, Abraham, Hannah, Judah, Solomon, Paul, Sarah, Joshua, Mary, Daniel, Hannah, Jacob, Thomas, Joseph, and Simon. Isn't it rather strange how these resentful creatures chose to dump the spirit of their ancestors in favor of their master's Christian Imani, that is, Kwanzaa for faith? One of the more humorous placards has a slave commenting to Mr. Madison on the damage from a Rapidian river flood. I tell you what, Master, I think the Lord Almighty, by and large, He do most as much as harm as good. The truth of the matter is, Madison himself recognized that slavery was wrong. This is the father of our Constitution now. James Madison, writing to abolitionists Francis Wright in 1825, the magnitude, come on fingers, of this evil among us is so deeply felt and so universally acknowledged that no merit could be greater than that of devising a satisfactory remedy for it. The slavery issue was as complex as it was evil. It was peculiar in the extreme. However, as long as it lasted, it represented one of the greatest missionary projects of all time. How else do you account for the fact that so many black folks are Baptists, especially in the South? How about that? Phyllis Wheatley represents another illustration of revisionist distortion. Born in Africa in 1753, she was placed into bondage by her own people while still a child. She was brought to Boston and sold to Mr. John Wheatley, a tailor, as a servant for his wife, under her cruel taskmaster, quotation marks. She learned to read both English and Latin. More importantly, Phyllis came to know her master's Lord and Savior after hearing Mr. Whitefield preach, George Whitefield. Developing a talent for poetry, she became the first black poetess in America to have her work published. The next time you visit a bookstore, ask for a copy of Poems by Phyllis Wheatley. For one of the wildest, politically incorrect, Uncle Tom hate literature at its best, examples of what not to read in a public gathering. Try handling her most famous poem entitled On Being Brought from Africa to America. After all, why waste your time with kiddie car material like Amistad when you can hear something that was profound? That's profound. And it says, "'Twas mercy brought me from my pagan land, taught me my benighted soul to understand that there is a God, that there is a Savior too. Once I redemption neither sought nor knew. Some new or sable race was with um, some view our sable race with scornful eye. Their color is a diabolic dye. Remember, Christians, Negroes black as Cain may be refined and join the angelic train. Amen." Now, while Phyllis was owned by a white guy, quotations, such was not the case for thousands of other less fortunate. As the slaves were initially sold by fellow Africans, many of their American taskmasters turned out to be former slaves themselves. Here's where it gets good. Mr. Bill Ward, a historical researcher and author of 57 works of nonfiction, comments on one of the more politically sensitive aspects of that peculiar institution. So black slave ownership is one of the most frequently overlooked parts of the slavery story. The U.S. Census of 1830 showed that 3,775 free Negroes owned 12,760 Negro slaves. Blacks owning blacks. How about that? And you thought it was about white people owning blacks. Nope. Not just them. They own, and it shows more. Oh, you can't? Can't hear you? Okay. See here. Can you hear me now? I'm getting sleepy. Let's see here. A fourth of the free Negro slave masters in South Carolina owned 10 or more slaves. 8 owned 30 or more. 2 black individuals, Justice Angel and Mrs. L. Horry of Colleton District, South Carolina, each owned 84 slaves, which placed them in the ranks of slave magnates, those who owned 50 or more slaves. And Charleston, 125 free Negroes owned slaves, representing more than $300,000 in taxable property. And North Carolina, 69 free Negroes were slave owners. Slave owners. Now, what the title say? Facts are a stubborn thing, aren't they? William Ellison, a free slave who lived near Charleston, owned 63 slaves. His sons owned 9 more. Ellison's wealth was greater than 90% of his white neighbors, and 15 times greater than the state's average for whites. In the entire state, only 5% owned as much real estate as Ellison, and he owned more slaves than 99% of the South's slaveholders. How about that? In 1860, at least 6 blacks in Louisiana owned 65 or more slaves. The largest number, 152 slaves, were owned by widow Richards and her son, P.C. Richards, who owned a large sugarcane plantation. Another Negro slave magnate in Louisiana, who with more than 100 slaves, was Antony Dubochet, whatever that says, a sugar planter whose estate was valued in 1860 as $264,000. That year, the mean wealth of Southern white men was $3,978. this black person made a killing on money. See also Dixie's censored subject, Black Slave Owners by Robert M. Grooms, Black Masters, A Free Family of Color in the Old South by Michael P. Johnson and James L. Rourke, and Black Confederates and Afro-Yankees in Civil War Virginia by Irvin L. Jordan Jr., a black professor at the University of Virginia. How about them apples? As space limitations and the purpose of this book, oh, what is that? Oh, do not permit more than a cursory treatment of the subject at hand, let me say next that the war between the states was not fought over slavery. The war between the states was not fought over slavery. General William Tecumseh Sherman made the rather cryptic comment in his book, Memoirs 1. The truth is not always palatable and should not always be told. Abraham Lincoln said this: my paramount objective in this struggle is to save the Union. If I could save the Union without freeing any slaves, I would do it. Some people are going to fall over. Then President Lincoln's freed the slaves? It gets pretty thicker here. Okay. Let's see here. This is precisely one. It's not to say that anyone should hate President. The memory of President Lincoln. He was a great president. But, you know, Trump is a good president too. He's just not the perfect president, you know. Ronald Reagan was a great president, but he wasn't a perfect president. This is precisely why Lincoln waited so long to issue his celebrated Emancipation Proclamation, and then only as a defensive maneuver, he stated it to Navy Secretary Gideon Wallace on July 13, 1862. It was a military necessity absolutely essential for the salvation of the Union, that we must free the slaves or be ourselves subdued. Furthermore, the celebrated document applied only to slaves being held in Confederate states. Honest Abe's reprieve did not cover Yankee chattel in Kentucky, Maryland, or Missouri, however you want to say it. According to the Gray Book, as cited by authors James and Walter Kennedy. Got to turn the page. Union Commander USS Grant excuse for not freeing his own slaves way up in the land of Lincoln was that good help is so hard to come by these days. That's why he didn't free him. Concerning the true motive for the Civil War, Colonel Edward Mandell House, chief advisor to President Woodrow Wilson, wrote through one of his characters in Philip Drew, administrator. Cynical Europe said that the North would have it appear that a war had been fought for human freedom, whereas it was fought for money. Uncle Tom was just a pawn that got the ball rolling. Of course. William Darrah Kelly, a liberal congressman from Philadelphia, declared rather candidly, yes, sneer at or doubt as you may, the Negro is the coming man for whom we have waited. For added reading on the subject of slavery, see Myths and Realities of American Slavery, The True History of Slavery in America by John C. Perry, Light Men of War, Black Troops in the Civil War, 1862-85, by Noah Andre Trudeau, Black Confederates by Charles Kelly Barrow, J. Seegers, and R.B. Rosenberg, Forced into Glory by Lerone Bennett, executive editor for Ebony Magazine, and any number of relevant articles by Dr. John Hope Franklin, a black professor at Duke University. The real problem underlying the slavery issue is rarely, if ever, discussed. I mentioned earlier, in reference to Madison's consternation, that any easy solution to the problem was not to be had. But remember that the theme of this material concerns satanic opposition to America and the sticky wicket of slavery as one of the devil's most successful maneuvers. The issue centered around something that was obvious in America's early years: just what to do. What do you do with the slaves after you release them? A nation of free slaves with minimal um, could you do could you casually whatever that means or for self determination Kwanzaa was not up for consideration since blacks were perceived as being incapable of caring for themselves. See Phyllis Wheatley's allusion to Genesis 4:12. The only practical solution was to send them back to Africa, but this would have crippled the treasury. Commenting to the on the difficult but necessary demands of an emancipation with exportation, Thomas Jefferson wrote, "But as it is, we have the wolf by the ears, and we can neither hold him nor safely let him go. Justice as one scale and self preservation is in the other." Justice is in one scale and self preservation is in the other. As again, Bill Grady is writing this by what he learned from the writings of former presidents and other people and his own opinions. Okay, so don't get all mad at me and upset with me because I'm reading what somebody else wrote. Haiti, Panama, and Liberia were the leading sites under consideration by the American Colonization Society for resettlement of the Negro population. Rosias G. Rushenduni summarizes. The Emancipation Proclamation must be set in this context of colonization hopes. However illusory, they were a long-standing consideration and were illegally enacted by Congress. The Negro was to be emancipated of slavery, and many hoped and believed the United States was to be emancipated of the Negro. As late as March 1865, a month before his assassination, Lincoln was considering the removal of the entire Negro population from the United States. While speaking to a delegation of free blacks at the White House, August 14th, 1862, Lincoln really split some rails when he said this: "Your race suffers very greatly, many of them, by living among us, while ours suffers from your presence. In a word, we suffer from on each side. If this is be admitted, it affords a reason, at least, why we should be separated. But how would anyone indict the great emancipator as being a racist? So then, why cover the whole story? Did Lincoln hate black people because he didn't believe the races were equally endowed? In a debate with Stephen Douglas at Charlestown, Illinois, on September 18th, 1858, Lincoln disclosed, as cited by Richard Current. Here we go. "I will say then that I am not, nor have ever been in favor of bringing about in any way the social and political equality of the white and black races. That I am not, nor ever have been in favor of office, to hold office, nor, let me back up, of making voters or jurors of Negroes, nor of qualifying them to hold office, nor to intermarry with white people. And I will say, in addition to this, there is a physical difference between the white and the black races, which I believe will forever forbid the two races living together on terms of social and political equality. And inasmuch as they cannot so live, while they do remain together, there must be a position of superior and inferior, as and I as much as any man in favor of having the superior position to the white race." Now, I don't believe that. I don't believe what Lincoln believed. I don't believe that I am superior to black people. Um, I was raised up in the South, like I said earlier, and the saying is black and white people don't intermarry. You know, that's just wrong. But really, my opinion is if a white person wants to marry a black person, that's their business. They can if they want to. That's their business. It's a free country, you know. And like I said, I don't believe I'm superior, and I sure don't believe I'm inferior. I think we're all equal in the eyes of God. Whenever the real Abraham Lincoln comes into view, any number of stunned neophytes, victims of TV, America's public school system, too many video games, find themselves wondering why Abe seems to be talking as though he didn't hold to the panacea all men are created equal clause. Do you suppose that they ever checked to see what the author of that abuse statement believed? Wow, writes. Jefferson opposed slavery as morally indefensible, but he also opposed the incorporation of the Negro in the American social and political system. I'm almost done with this, matter of fact. He considered the Negro inferior to other races, but thought that the circumstance should not deprive him of his freedom. He was, throughout his long life, in the politically uncomfortable position of wishing the slaves emancipated, but only on the condition that they be deported into toto beyond the present or potential frontiers of the United States. Uh, Nothing. I think that's why Haiti was the drop-off point for a lot of African Americans. And Haiti, that word Haiti, I think it means hate, to hate it, or something like that. I think I read about that somewhere or another. Despised something, the name. See here. Nothing is more certainly written in the Book of Fate, Jefferson wrote in his autobiography, than that these people are to be free, nor it is less certain that these two races, equally free, cannot live in the same government. See, now here's where the rubber really meets the road. You just read one of the most remarkable prophecies in history. The issue is not whether you like it or not, whether you agree with it or not, or whether you think it is hate literature or not. The issue is, did you understand what the man wrote down in the English language? And secondly, has the prophecy came to pass? It only being roughly 175 years since he told you what to expect. So, was he right or was he wrong? Look at those heavy words again. Nothing is more certainly written in the book of fate that the two races equally free cannot live in the same government. Has the majority of modern day black Americans suppressed their emancipated ancestors in the area of self reliance? Would a check of current welfare rolls according to a race help to answer that question? This is what he's saying now. It ain't me. Okay? But this is something we all need to consider. It really is. For ourselves and for our children. I mean, look at America today. Look how terrible it is. Look where we're going. We need to check ourselves. Wide our blank. We need to check ourselves. How long does it's not about Black Lives Matter. It's about all lives matter. Black and white lives. All people here in that city, all lives matter. Let's see here. Where did I get off? How long does the racial tension have to go in this country before someone is willing to admit that the man may have been right after all? You don't have to hate people in order to recognize reality. Does realism equal racism? It's just a reality. That's what I say. Nearly 2 centuries after he told you it wouldn't work, the poor man can't even rest in his own cemetery. Do you think that ACLU and the Supreme Court can force people of different races to enjoy being in one another's company? Will affirmative action and zero tolerance policies breed genuine respect at the workplace? Will clamping down on racial profiling guarantee that cabbies and mail carriers and firemen do not experience a higher level of stress when entering a black neighborhood as opposed to a white one? Am I supposed to smile when Congressman John Conyers of Michigan attempts to persuade my government to grant millions of dollars in reparations to the descendants of 19th century slaves alive in the 21st century? How crazy is that? Taking him beyond the bounds of his habitation and for Pecuniary motives was a colossal mistake that will never be corrected this side of the rapture because of the law of sowing and reaping. We must, I'm almost done, learn to live with the fallout. Only God can grant the needed wisdom to do so. In the meantime, don't jump every time someone cries racism. After all, white men aren't supposed to be able to jump, remember? And beware the same devil that orchestrated this imbroglio is also after you and me, all of us. So that concludes that. That's about the slavery issue. So that's all been read. I read all of it. I thought I was going to read part of it, but I read the whole thing. And again, you can look at this book for yourself, How Satan Turned America Against God. Great book by Bill Grady. And that's just something to consider. There are a lot of great black people here in this country. And without black people, I don't think this country would be as blessed as it was. Because it took what, these people said of old time, said, whether it's Lincoln or Madison or whoever, Jefferson, and it's blessed this nation with black people. There's a lot of black people out there that really blessed this nation. There are a lot of white people who've been blessed this nation. There are a lot of white people who haven't blessed this nation. They're a burden and a hindrance, and so are black people. Some certain black people, certain white people, and some certain whatever color people. Hindrances on this nation, and they cry out and they say all these things, and that I deserve this and I deserve that, and what in the world is wrong with my book? I should get this and I should get that, and so on and so forth. And it's just silly. And white people are the same way, And we're talking about welfare. There are a lot of white people on welfare. They don't want to get a job. They don't go out and work when they can do it. But there are a lot of white people on welfare that can't work, and then they need help. And same thing with black people. I've met some of the best black people in the world living in South Carolina. I mean, some of the nicest. I met some black people here, and they even have an accent, as from Tennessee. Some of the best black people in the world here in Tennessee. It ain't about color, you know. But it's about how they were people were raised. It's about how how what they learn from their moms and dads. So it's same with it. No matter what color you are, you don't have to be. It doesn't have to be a generational curse. Just because my parent might not have been the greatest daddy in the world doesn't mean I'm can be that way to my son. Not saying that he was or wasn't. I'm just making an example. Generational curses don't have to be handed down, especially whenever it concerns slavery. Whenever talk about slavery and everything, that's something that should never happen. And it's something that we can't blame each other about. It's gone. There's no more slavery. Okay, we need to drop it and move on. But other black people limit black people, just like white people limit white people, and white people limit black people. Black people limit white people, and stuff like that, and what they do and say. But as long as we are loving the Lord Jesus Christ as our personal Savior, we're looking to Him for everything that we need. We won't be so consternated with that. We won't be into that. Well, your ancestors did this, and you're a white honky, you're a black man, you're a nigger, you're a negro, whatever, you're a cracker. No, we will be saying you are a brother, you are a beloved of the Lord, you're my brethren, and stuff like that. You'd be talking the words of God and not the words of men based on your skin tone. And that, my friends, that's all I have to say about that. That's all I had to make for right now. It's going to get into an hour and 10 minutes here. And so I hope you got something out of this about slavery, what it was and what it was not. It was not about slavery in the Civil War. It was about money. And the next part on this is about the Catholic immigrants and how they tried to entice the rebels to split again from the Union, And so, yeah. And then it's about secret societies That's another thing that those are two other things that how Satan turned America against God. Okay, so that's it for right now. Hope you got something out of this. Hope you enjoyed it, and please comment, subscribe, and hope to bring you more. And I hope you got something out of it. Hope you can hear me. And God bless. We'll see you later. Take care.